Forget every war you learned about in history class. Forget the battles of attrition, the grand strategies, and the noble, desperate struggles for land or ideology. The single most humiliating military defeat in the history of the developed world didn't happen on a beach, or in a forest, or against an organized human enemy. It happened in 1932 in the remote wheat fields of Western Australia, and it was lost to an army of tall, flightless birds. This is the astonishing, true account of the Great Emu War. The stage for this absurdity was set by two very serious, very human crises. First, the Australian government, following World War I, had promised vast tracts of land to returning servicemen under the Soldier Settlement Scheme. The idea was to turn war heroes into farmers, and the target crop was wheat. The problem was the land they were given, the Campion district of Western Australia's wheat belt, was marginal. The soil was poor, and many of the ex-soldiers had no farming experience. Second, the Great Depression hit. The global price of wheat collapsed, and these struggling veterans found themselves unable to pay their mortgages, their crops barely worth the effort of harvesting. They were hanging on by a thread, and they desperately needed a good season. Then came the third, feathered crisis. Emus, the second largest bird on Earth, are a fundamental part of the Australian landscape. They stand nearly 6 feet tall, weigh over 100 pounds, and can sprint across the scrub at speeds up to 30 miles per hour, about 50 kilometers per hour. Every year after their breeding season, about 20,000 of these birds would migrate inland, seeking water and new grazing grounds. The problem? The ex-soldiers' newly planted wheat fields, irrigated for livestock and fenced against rabbits, now resembled an all-you-can-eat, high-protein buffet, perfectly positioned on the emu's traditional migration route. The birds invaded the fields, stomping and devouring the valuable wheat. To make matters worse, their size and strength meant they flattened the rabbit coof fences, creating gaping holes for smaller, equally destructive pests like actual rabbits to follow. For the desperate soldier farmers, the emus were the final, unbearable insult. The farmers petitioned the government for help. Since many of them were veterans, they didn't appeal to the Minister of Agriculture, whom they distrusted. Instead, they appealed directly to the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce, requesting the deployment of machine guns, the weapons they knew best, to cull the destructive flock. Pearce agreed, seeing it as a minor, quick-fix public relations exercise to appease the struggling veterans, and perhaps a bit of target practice for the Royal Australian Artillery. In November 1932, the military operation began. The 3-man team deployed to the field was led by Major G.P.W. Meredith, armed with 2 Lewis light machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The mission was simple: eliminate the estimated 20,000 emus causing havoc. What was supposed to be a straightforward pest control operation quickly devolved into a chaotic, internationally ridiculed farce. Major Meredith's men first spotted a mob of about 50 emus. They set up their guns, aiming for an easy slaughter, but the emus had other ideas. The moment the first shots rang out, the birds scattered. Far from bunching up as expected, The emus displayed remarkable battlefield discipline. They broke into small, highly mobile, and unpredictable units, dashing across the rough terrain faster than a man could track. The soldiers tried a new tactic, an ambush at a water source, where thousands of birds were congregating. This time, they waited until a huge number were in range before opening fire. Disaster struck immediately. One of the Lewis guns jammed after just a few rounds, and the birds, startled by the noise, scattered again, vanishing into the scrub with astonishing speed. After 3 days of fighting, the soldiers had expended hundreds of rounds of ammunition to kill, by their own admission, only a few dozen birds. The media, which had been sent along to document the operation as a feel-good story for the farmers, quickly dubbed the fiasco the Great Emu War. Newspapers back in the US and the UK picked up the story, finding the idea of an army losing to a flightless bird hilarious. Desperate, Major Meredith tried his last and most famous tactic, mounting a machine gun onto the back of a moving truck to chase the birds down. This only made the situation more absurd. The trucks, bouncing wildly across the unforgiving, rutted landscape, couldn't keep up with the nimble birds. The gunner was too busy holding on to the shaking weapon to aim effectively. Furthermore, the large, muscle-bound emus proved surprisingly difficult to kill, possessing what one soldier described as the invulnerability of tanks. They could absorb multiple hits and keep running, only to collapse miles away. In a now famous quote, Major Meredith was forced to admit, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world." News reports reached the Australian Parliament, where politicians began joking that if medals were to be awarded, they should go to the emus, who have won every round so far. After a week of non-stop blunders, the operation was officially called off on November 8, 1932. The final tally was an embarrassing one. Only a few hundred emus killed for thousands of rounds of ammunition used, and the birds were still in control of the wheat fields. However, the farmers facing ruin continued to demand military assistance. The government, pressured by the public outcry, agreed to a second, more cautious attempt later that month. While this second campaign saw the greater number of birds culled, Major Meredith eventually claimed a kill ratio of about 1 emu for every 10 rounds. It was clear the military method was unsustainable and politically toxic. The military was permanently withdrawn in December 1932. The emus had won. The Australian government was ultimately forced to abandon its humiliating military campaign and instead implement a bounty system, encouraging the farmers to do the job themselves. It was an admission that military firepower, even machine guns, was useless against an adversary whose only tactic was speed, endurance, and the ability to scatter. The Great Emu War of 1932 remains one of history's most bizarre and unforgettable footnotes. It's a hilarious, true-life story of a modern army being utterly defeated by a force of nature, serving as a powerful, enduring reminder that sometimes the simplest creatures, the ones who simply want a bite of food, can outwit the greatest human strategies. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time for more unbelievable history. Subscribe and stay tuned.